11 of 25, Emily, from the book Good Little Boys Go to Heaven by Stukin. Fall 1956, East Texas. I was sitting quietly in my living room when I heard a loud, persistent knocking on my front door. After a few minutes spent trying to ignore the knocking, I pried myself from the chair in which I was sitting, dragged myself out of the living room, into the hallway, to the front door. I answered the knocking to find this girl standing there crying. I do not remember having ever seen her before. I might have passed her in town, but I did not remember her. I held up a hand to her, and she was quiet for a moment. What are you trying to say?" I asked. "Joey said he was leaving, and he told me goodbye. He's over at the bus stop waiting for a bus. At least I think he's still there. You want him to go?" "No." "Is there something you can do to make him stay? I love him, and he says he loves me. Has he ever said the name Emily to you? I'm Emily." "Emily? No." She looked to be 18 years or so. She was a tall girl, about half a foot taller than me, thin, almost straight as a board. Light skin, colored girl, dark brown hair, shoulder length. She was an attractive girl. I stepped back from the door and she rushed in past me. She turned and looked at me and waited for me to say something, I guessed. I had to take a moment to think about what she had just said. This girl I had never laid eyes on before was at my door in my house saying something about my son. "Let's go in here and sit," I started while pointing toward the living room. She waited for me to sit and then following my hand gesture, she sat. "Tell me what you are talking about. Joey never said anything to me about you. I had no knowledge you even existed before you came knocking at my door. I never knew Joey to have any friends. I certainly never knew of his being in love with you or anyone else for that matter. Tell me what you are talking about." "I first saw Joey 2 years ago. I'd heard talk about him and seen his mama in town, but the way he and his mama kept to themselves, I'd never seen him before. His mama would come into town, get the things she needed, and leave town without much of a word. Then I saw him in town, and he saw me, and he stood staring at me, and I looked away, going back to what I was doing. And when I turned back to see what he was doing, he had left. Then Sunday came, and as we was leaving church, he was waiting outside, and he gave me a nod of his head as my little sister Jewel and I walked past him. The next Sunday, the same foolishness. Then the third Sunday in a row, I stopped and asked him, "What is wrong with you, boy?" He said, I have to keep coming by this church until you ask me to come walking with you." I told him, you can walk Jewel and me home if you can mind yourself." I stopped him at the front gate and sent him on his way down the road. He started coming by my house regularly. He'd stand out at the gate until Jewel would see him. "That boy's out at the gate," she would say to me. I'd wave him up to the front of our house, and we'd sit out front, him on a stoop, me on the ground, leaning against a tree. And when he asked me, I went by his house once. His mama was sick, and she called him into her bedroom. He came out and said his mama told him she needed some peace and quiet. He never invited me by again. We wasn't hardly saying anything, but I guess we were saying it too loud. I thought we'd be together. Then his mama died. You know his mama died. He started talking about leaving before she was in the ground. He came to me the night she died. "I have to leave," he said. "There are better places for me than here." "Joy, things can be all right," I said. "We got you and me. Things will be all right." He shook his head. "I won't stay here. There are better places for me. There have to be." And he's gone. He didn't ask me to go with him. He just left. "Please go get him. He's over at the bus station, waiting for the next bus going through. Please go get him. I think he's still there. He said the next bus won't get here until the morning, but he didn't say what morning. But I'm guessing it's this coming one. You can go get him. Stop him from leaving." I sat quietly for a moment, trying to digest what this girl had just said. It was difficult for me to believe that they had been as close as she said, but I had not seen him in a few years. What did I know of his life? She sat looking at me, waiting for me to say something, waiting for a plan that would keep Joey here. He must not have spoken to her much of me. If he had, I am sure she would have known that I was not the person to talk him out of doing anything. He had little regard for me, but she did not seem to realize that. So maybe she was just desperate. What do you think I can say that will stop it from going? I asked. She shrugged her shoulders and then said, I don't know. Surely you can say something. You're his daddy, aren't you? Surely you got some kind of say over what he does. At least you can try. That is, if you don't want him to go. I saw him a couple of days ago. He told me he was leaving. He seemed to have made up his mind about it. I don't think I could stop him if from going if I was of a mind to try. She frowned up her face and rose. She held her head down and said, I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't know who else to turn to. Joey just means so much to me. When you don't have much, you try to hold on to what little you think you have. In my mind, that was just Joey, Jewel, and me. I'm sorry to have bothered you. She rushed out of the room and then out of the house. I stood in the doorway watching her walk away quickly. I was not happy about him leaving either, but I could have said nothing that would have made him stay. I only thought of the girl for the next few days. I'm not sure if I responded more to her desperation or mine, or maybe I was simply curious about who was, or maybe I just wanted to know what she could tell me about my son, perhaps all of it. I decided I needed to find her and talk to her. I thought about how to contact her discreetly, and then I remembered she said something about Joey following her home from church. As best I could recall, there was only one colored church in the county. I had had relationship with the church of a sort, at least a relationship with the preacher. He hadn't seen me in a while, and I was hoping he wouldn't see me on this occasion either. Against some misgivings, I decided to wait for her outside the church, just as she had said my son had. I dressed in a suit and tie, slowly walked out to my car, and sat behind the steering wheel for what seemed an hour, trying to muster up the courage to do something I knew I probably shouldn't be doing. I slowly drove south down the highway, then turned off west onto a dirt road that I knew ran past the church. I drove slightly past the church and stopped my car. I parked, got out, and took my post beside my car, trying to look casual across the dirt road while waiting for her to come out. I got more than a few stares from colors coming out. Then she reached the doorway. She looked beautiful. I was not sure how to approach her. She might have a problem with me going up to her like I knew her. People talking would not bother me, but it might bother her. She looked in my direction, but gave no indication that she saw me. She started up the road in the opposite direction from where I was parked. I stood and looked for the preacher, but he didn't appear. I got in my car and turned it around. I started up the road after her. As I approached her and the little girl she was walking hand in hand, I slowed. As I passed them, I shouted out the window, I'd like to see you. I'd like to talk to you tomorrow. She gave no indication that she heard me. I sped up and continued on my way. I was about halfway through a bottle when the doorbell rang. I walked to the door and opened it. There stood the girl. I stepped back from the doorway and she rushed in past me. I pointed to the living room and she went in. She stood waiting for me to take my seat. Please go ahead and be seated, I insisted. I sat down shortly after she did. My thinking was slightly fuzzy from the whiskey. She said quietly, waiting for me to speak. Tell me about yourself, please. Why are you interested in me? I'm nobody to you. I'm curious as to why Joey never mentioned you to me. I was really curious about her. Joey could not have mentioned her when I had not seen him. I guess he never mentioned me because there isn't much to say about me. And Joey is gone. I nodded. What's your name? Emily. Please, Emily, I'm just interested in finding out about a friend of my son. I never knew he had any friends other than the small dog and his guitar. You're the first friend he's had that I've known who could talk to me. She looked uncomfortable. It was clear she did not want to talk about herself to me. I leaned closer, trying to get her to relax. I tried to soften the expression on my face. I smiled. Your family sharecroppers? She shook her head no. My sister Jill and I live on what we get from Joey. I used to work for the grocer in town, but I haven't worked anywhere since Joey and I have been together. He gave me some money before he left. I don't know what we're going to do after it runs out. That's part of why I thought we would always be together. Even though he had to look after his mama, he still looked after Jewel and me as well. I guess I'll have to maybe go back to the grocery. Joey is gone. I nodded again. We can only hope he'll come back. His mother kept him here. Maybe he felt she was all that was keeping him here. I don't know. Maybe he'll come to see there is more for him here than her. You mean me? He didn't give me no mind when he left. You've lost people. Loss affects different people differently. Sometimes it brings people together. Other times it drives them apart. I will not pretend to know what is going on in his head. What's in his head will change. Memories fade. The painful ones he has of his life here will fade. Others will become clearer. The good memories of you and him. You have to be patient with him, if you can. She nodded her head. He got the money he gave her from me. I had been giving him and his mother money for 16 years. I never gave any thought to what they did with any of it. For all I knew, they could have saved enough to have both left the county years ago. His mother never chose to leave, but he did. It's just your sister and you? What happened to your folks? My grandma died a couple of years ago. Jewel and I have been on our own since then. How old are you? You don't look old enough to have been looking after yourself and your sister for 2 years. I'm old enough. I'm 18. I was too old for anyone to take in, and I kept Jewel doing what she needed to do. And no one took no notice of us living alone, and no one wanted any part of Jewel and me. We get along fine. I finish school. Jewel gets good grades. We both go to church every Sunday. Your parents? She screwed up her face, and I held up my hand to say to her that she did not need to say anything. I thought maybe I had pried enough information out of her for this meeting. I had hopes there would be more meetings. I wish Joe had mentioned you to me. I wish I could have gotten to know the two of you together. Please let us talk again soon. If there's anything you need, just ask. I rose and she did likewise. She started out of the room. Just as she reached the door, she turned to me and said, Yes, let's talk again soon. She opened the door, walked out, and closed it behind her. I went back to the bottle and finished the other half. The more I thought about what she said about my son and her, the more I realized I had no way of knowing if she was telling the truth. I did not even know enough about him to test her. I decided it was worth it to take her word. It was worth taking the chance, even if it cost me a little money. I wanted to talk to her again, but I still had no way of contacting her other than going by her church, which I could not do again. I decided I just had to wait for her to come to me. Business took me into town, some business I'd inherited from my mother. It had been 4 or 5 years since she passed, and there were still physical assets I had, most of which I was unaware of. Most of the assets she passed to me were liquidated. I was not interested in business. I, and I always had to be almost begged to show up for business that required my signature or approval. My mother's father owned about half the county. What he owned, he passed to his son, then from his son to my mama, from my mama to me. It will pass to my daughter after I am gone. I had to deal with a bank's business at the time. I'm unsure why I chose to hold on to my share of the bank. Bank business causes the most aggravation. It required the most attention. I had been convinced to hold on to my portion of the bank because I had been convinced the county needed a stable source of funding. The stable ownership of the bank was my obligation to the people there. I knew my family and I had benefited from the county support through their business with the bank, so I maintained what was my only connection left with the county. I was told there were regular audits and the numbers didn't add up correctly this time. It seems the bank manager had been stealing money. He said he only borrowed the money and planned to pay it back. Unfortunately for him, he forgot to keep any records of a loan. He had to have known he'd be caught, but I guess the saying about begging for forgiveness held in this case. He probably would have been told no if he'd been asked permission to borrow the money. When we went through the books, I found I owned more property than I realized. I still owned a part of a saloon and a motel. I did not remember there being a motel in the county. It had probably been torn down and the records had not been properly maintained, was my thought then. I shrugged it off, and after we had chosen a temporary bank manager and agreed to meet in 2 days, I headed for home. 2 weeks passed, and I still had not heard from the girl. I had begun my every evening activity drinking when I heard the doorbell ring. I chose to ignore the ring. Again it rang. I ignored this ring as well. Suddenly the girl came to mind. I rushed to the door and flung it open. There she was standing. "Hello, please come in," I said. I stepped back from the doorway. She rushed in past me. She walked right into the living room and waited next to her seat for me to be seated. I smiled and sat down. She did likewise. "I'm happy to see you. I have been thinking about you. I'm glad you came." She nodded her head. She still seemed very ill at ease, alone in my house with me. "Have you eaten? There's still some of the dinner I had left in the refrigerator." "Yes, I've eaten. No, thank you." I wanted to ask her about my son and her, but I did not think that was something she wanted to talk about. I could not think of what she might want to talk about. She was here, though, and that was a good thing. "How old is your little sister?" "She's 6. Her name is Jewel. She's at home in bed, asleep." "It's kind of early for her to be in bed, isn't it?" "No." "Have you given any thought as to what you're going to do?" "There's a good chance Pup might return, but have you thought about what you will do until he returns?" She shrugged her shoulders. "I figure I'll go on taking care of Jewel, maybe go back to the grocery like I said before. Jewel and I don't need much. I can take care of us both. We were getting help from folks at church before Jory started helping." "You called him Pup?" I nodded my head. "You never heard him call that? I started calling him that when he was 5 or 6. I bought him a little dog. He named the dog Joey. We, his mama and I, started calling the dog Joey and the boy Pup. I guess Joey is all you've ever heard him called." She nodded. "Joey is what he calls himself. He never mentioned Pup to me at all. He never spoke of a little dog. His guitar was the only possession that he had that I was aware of. It was the only thing that meant anything to him after his mama passed. It's the only thing he took with him. The dog died long ago before you two met. I guess it died. I never could get him or his mama to talk to me about the dog. I bought him the guitar because he said he did not want another dog. I have an old acoustic guitar. I play a little bit myself, only country and western." I laughed. She smiled. "He plays really well, I think. I don't much care for the songs, but it's stuff he picks up off the radio. But I can tell he plays really well." "Country and western?" She nodded. "I've never heard him play," I threw in. "He's a good singer, too. He has a good church voice. He never went to church, though. I guess you know that." I shook my head. I said quietly, trying to encourage her to go on. He said he used to read out of the Bible to his mama. I guess that's the only religion he had. He read out of the Bible to me once. That's how I know he can read. He said his mama taught him to read. She taught him to add and subtract too. Joe is pretty smart. He should have come to school, but he never did. I considered offering her a drink of whiskey as I wanted one myself. That did not seem like a good idea, so I did not offer, and I refrained. I offered her a drink of lemonade. I was sure some was left from what my daughter had made for dinner a few days before. She shook her head. I rose and motioned for her to follow me. I led her into the kitchen. I got two glasses from the cupboard and set them on the kitchen table. I went to the refrigerator and opened the door. Right up front was the pitcher of lemonade I had remembered. I withdrew the pitcher and closed the door behind me. I went over to the table, poured two tall glasses of lemonade. I handed her one that she took, picked up the other, and took a sip. It was really sweet, just the way I like. It's really good, really sweet, just the way I like, she said. I motioned for her return in the direction we had come. She waited by her seat for me to be seated. We sat. You know, Joey and I weren't very close in the last few years. It'd been a lot longer than a few years since we had been close. I know. He told me he never could figure out what to say to you. He said he said it made him uncomfortable to be around you. I see I make you uncomfortable as well. She nodded but spoke. I think I knew all along, even before his mama died, that he wasn't happy here. I might even have known he'd leave after she passed. I didn't want to admit it to myself. I didn't want to believe he'd leave here without me. She was upset, but she seemed relaxed. I hoped she was being more comfortable with me. It's getting dark. I'd best be on my way. Can you come again tomorrow? You can bring the little one if you like. She thought for a moment and then nodded her head. In an instant, she was gone. I had a meeting in town. We were still going over the bank records. I had no idea what any of it meant, but it was all being explained to me. This business turned out to be more trouble than I could have imagined. The difficulty the board members were having in trying to help me understand what I was agreeing to showed in the frequently pained expressions on their faces. They could have stolen every cent I had, but it impressed me how much they seemed genuinely guided by a love for this county and its people. They spoke with great reverence of my grandfather and great grandfather. My impression was that my mother was only slightly more interested than I was, but she had participated more, mainly to support their efforts. But still, I showed up on time when I was supposed to, and I stayed until I was told the others would be leaving as well. I owned a lot more than I realized through the bank. In addition to the motel and the saloon I mentioned earlier, I owned land I thought it was there just there for the taking. I asked to cut the meeting short so that I could have some time alone to read the papers. I wanted to cut the meeting short before being told I owned more things I had no use for. They nodded their heads as if that made sense to them. I was home shortly after noon. I started reading some papers I had taken home from the bank. Soon I fell asleep. It was about 3 o'clock when my daughter got home from school. She called out for me as she was walking through the door. She soon entered the room and greeted me with a hug. She was 10 years old, going on 30. She was a woman of the house as far as she was concerned. I sometimes thought maybe she was happy her mother had left. How was school? It was fine. Mrs. Johnson invited me over again. She's waiting out front if you say it's all right. I nodded. What time should I come to get you? Mrs. Johnson says she'll bring me home if you have some business to tend to. Mrs. Johnson was actually my wife's friend. She had she had three girls in the age range of Annabelle, my daughter. So I figured it was better to let her go. Mrs. Johnson usually brought her Annabelle back a couple of hours before bedtime. I take Anna to school the next morning, and Mrs. Johnson picked her Annabelle up with her three daughters. Every day she'd drive Annabelle by my house to ask Annabelle if I could go to their house for dinner. Every day I said yes. I'll see you when you return, I said, finishing the conversation. She hugged me again, and then she was gone. It could not have been more than an hour of daylight left when they showed up. I opened the door and let Emily and her sister in. I followed them into the living room and we sat. I gave Annabelle a quick thought, but I was not sure where she was. I hoped she wouldn't walk in on my visitors and me, but the thought quickly passed. Can I get you something? Have you eaten? I have something in the refrigerator if you're hungry. No, we just ate. I fried up some fish I caught out of the river. I went fishing and it took me a lot longer than expected to catch anything worth eating. That's why we're so late. I thought about not coming, but I said I would, so I did. It's not too late, is it? No, no. I was just wondering what I was going to spend this evening doing. I'll drive the two of you home after we visited. We had graduated from talking to visiting. The little girl just sat there, staring at me, not saying a word. Think we have some lemonade in the refrigerator. No, thank you. We really can't stay long. Nothing much was said between us. She repeated some of what had said about Pup before. The little girl was getting somewhat restless. I guess neither Emily nor I were really in the mood to talk about much. Why don't I go ahead and drive you two home? You can come back in a couple of days, and maybe we'll both be in more talkative moods then. She smiled and nodded her head. We rose, and they both followed me outside to my car. I opened the back door of the car. They both crawled in. I got in the front and started the car. Emily gave me directions with some difficulty. Cutting across pastures was not possible in a car. She could not give exact directions using the roads. We managed, though. The road ended a couple of 100 feet from where their shack was. They crawled out, and after saying a quick goodbye, they disappeared into the darkness. At least now, I knew where they lived. If I was welcome, I could go by and talk to Emily from time to time. We finally settled a bank business in town, and a couple of us walked over to the saloon I partially owned for a celebration of sorts. I had asked about the saloon if it was still standing. One of the men offered to walk me by if I had an interest in seeing it. When we walked into the place, the man behind the bar gave me a nod of his head, as if he knew me. I got that kind of greeting from most people in town, even though very few of them could I have called by name. This was a decent town and a decent county, with a leading citizen who was anything but decent. Ironic, we had only had a few before each of the other two men had to start making their way home. I did not care much for the company, but I just went there to drink anyway. Before we separated, one suggested I go by the motel and decide what I wanted to do with them. Following the directions I had been given, I left town and headed east on the highway that led past the motel I owned just to see what kind of shape it was in. I had seen the motel before, but never knew it was a motel. It seemed like a deserted group of buildings, and I never realized I owned it. It had been shut down for as long as I can remember. The exterior was weather worn, but I still chose to go inside the office and a few rooms to see more fully what kind of repair the motel was in. There was no sign of water damage inside. There just appeared to be a need for a good cleaning. I decided to try to sell the motel or maybe just clear the land. I had no use for a motel. Unfortunately, the concerns of the other board members showed for the county had transferred to me. I resolved to clear any unused land I owned and offer it for sale for development to anyone interested. I left the motel on the highway that ran past the motel, going further west away from town. I turned off south on a dirt road leading to another dirt road near where Emily and her sister had gotten out. I stopped on the second dirt road and thought about going by Emily's home. I knew it wasn't a liberty I should have taken. I felt I was headed in a direction I should not have been headed. I did not mean I was lost. I mean I should not have been visiting her. Still, I went by and looked at where they lived. I stopped and got out of my car near the spot where I had dropped them off. The distance seemed a lot shorter in the light of day. I walked up to the front door and knocked. The shack looked like hell from the outside. The roof looked to be a leaker. There was no answer. I tried the door to see if it was locked. It gave way with only a push. I stood there in the doorway looking into the room. The place was barely habitable. She said Pup had been taking care of her and her sister. He had not been doing a very good job. Even though the shack he shared with his mama did not look like much on the outside, it was clean and well kept. This place was a mess. I'd expressed too much, expected too much from a teenage girl who was trying to raise her 6-year-old sister. Puppet, Puppet tried to help them. Their church had as well. They both looked healthy and seemed to have active minds. They deserved better than this. I closed the door and walked back toward my car. It only took several minutes before I was home. I went into the living room and poured myself a drink. I was still somewhat stunned to see how they were living, but with every drink I had, I became less stunned. Finally, I forgot about the shack altogether. I'd never known the town to really need a motel. As far as I could tell, you got very little through traffic, so there was no real need for a motel. However, I developed other plans for the motel in the near future. I went to Emily's home. She was out in the yard, and she did not seem too happy to see me there. She came up to my car to greet me. She looked at me and nodded her head, saying hello. Good day, Emily, I started. I've got a proposition I hope you'll consider taking me up on. You know the motel on Route 6? I own them. I was thinking about opening up some of the rooms. They need a good cleaning, though. I was hoping we could work out some sort of arrangement where you could help me with that. She stood looking like she really was considering it. What do you want from me? For me just to clean rooms? Yes, we've been closed for as long as I can remember, so it could be quite a job. I thought I understood you to say you might have to look for some sort of work. I'd be working for you? She asked. I took this to mean what kind of pay would she be getting? Yes, I was thinking what I was thinking you and the little one could move in, and I could give you a little extra money for food and whatnot. I think it would be much more convenient if you lived there while you were working on the place. She nodded. Good, good. You can start whenever you like. Let me know when and I'll take you by there. Once again, she nodded. It was on a Saturday that I moved them in. Emily had spent the previous 2 days cleaning the room they were to stay in. She did a good job. The room they moved into was at the back of the rental office. It was very livable. There weren't any lamps there for lighting, so I went home to get a couple of kerosene lamps to tide them over until I could go into town. I had a man from town go by and see about getting the electricity there running. The plumbing was good, so there was at least running water. I joked to Emily they could sit in the dark and listen to the water run if they couldn't find any other amusement for themselves. It took about a month for the electricity to be turned on. They did not complain. Each time I offered an apology for having moved them in before I had lighting for them, Emily smiled, said she didn't mind sitting in the dark listening to the water run. A couple of months passed. I hadn't given Emily or the motel much thought till one day Emily called from the motel telling me that a man was there asking about renting a room. When the electricity was turned on, the vacancy sign was illuminated. The man saw the sign while passing and stopped and asked for a room. If any of the rooms were habitable, I told her to give him one and charge him whatever she thought was fair. The man turned out to be the new manager at the bank. He had been staying with a family in town since he had arrived. He was not happy with the living arrangements. He said he felt he needed the need for more privacy. Privacy was one thing he could certainly be assured in a motel where he was the lone renter. Technically, I ran the motel, but in reality, I left it up to Emily to do whatever she wanted to with them. The motel was almost breaking even between wayward husbands and others from the area looking to space out a little. She seemed to be comfortable there, and I thought she would stay a while longer. Time crept by. Anytime Anna would find friends to stay with for a short while, I would head for the motel. She had the number there and would frequently call to check on me. Emily and I got used to being around each other. Emily spent a lot of time quietly, sitting quietly in front of the motel office, watching me drink. A couple of years passed. She asked me something I didn't quite understand. She asked if I wanted her to come back to my room with me. Without giving any thought to what she had asked, I shook my head no. I can make it fine. I haven't had that much to drink, I laughed. She looked at me hard. I thought about what she had said. I thought about what she might be offering. I know you can make it fine, Mr. Joseph. Do you want me to come back to your room with you? Jewel is asleep. There's no one awake here but you and me. I shook my head while not saying anything. She couldn't have been more enticing in the way she asked. I had thought she understood all along my getting to know her was an attempt to get to know my son. She was my son's girl before he left town. Now she was offering herself to me, I feared. I couldn't have felt more uncomfortable. It made me wonder what kind of girl I was sitting with. How could she have offered herself to the father of the man she loved? I couldn't look at her. I felt myself inching away from her, even though my body wasn't moving. How could she have just said what she said? Or maybe it was the liquor I was hearing. I had convinced myself that she was content with the company I provided. It hadn't occurred to me that maybe she'd want more from a man than I could give her. She was an attractive girl. My presence at the motel most every evening had to be limiting her prospects. I hadn't meant to cut her off from other people, but I had. I still saw her as my son's friend, but he left without her, and as best I could tell, he had not contacted her in 2 years. She was free for the taking, not free for the taking by me, though. Still, it might have been the liquor I was hearing. I've had enough women to last me a lifetime. Your staying here isn't dependent on anything other than you doing your job. You understand that, don't you? I understand. I've seen the way you look at me, though. I just thought, I'm not sure what I thought. I think you're very attractive, but sometimes if I stare at you, it's probably the liquor, or maybe it's just happens to be you're sitting where I'm looking. Is that too much of a problem for you to endure? It's no problem for me to endure. If you catch me looking at you too long, hard, or anything else, just say something. I had to stop going by the motel to visit her. I convinced myself that my visits were innocent enough. I couldn't deny that I felt an attraction to her. I still wasn't sure what the nature of the attraction was. I'm sure it was something that didn't need to be explored. I staggered to the room I usually stayed in. The next morning I arose about an hour before sunrise. I stepped out and smoked my morning cigar. Upon finishing my cigar, I got in my car and drove home. I went into the living room and sat down. I had a strong desire for a drink. It seems I always need a drink when I have something difficult to deal with. I sat for about an hour, thinking about her, what she had said to me, what I had heard her say. I couldn't believe what I was feeling. I started thinking about her gestures, the way she tossed her head, the way she moved her hands, the way her face lit up when she smiled. I told myself I went by the motel because I felt comfortable there. She was very pleasant company. She joined in the conversation if I started one. Usually we talk about Jewel, what it would take to get the motel into better shape. Or sometimes she'd bring God into the conversation. or she'd sit quiet and just endure my presence. Only Annabelle ever thought of looking for me there. I could go there when I just wanted to be alone. I stayed away for a while and then I didn't. I got in my car, started driving without any destination in mind. Before I knew it, I was turning my car into the motel parking lot. I was tending to whatever business she was tending to whatever business she was tending to. The younger girl had not gotten in from school. I walked into the office and saw her standing behind the counter. She looked at me and smiled. She noted that I hadn't been coming around much. I nodded my head and asked her for a key. I went into one of the rooms and lay down. It had been 2 years since my son had left. I tried to convince myself that he was gone for good. He hadn't even seen fit to write a letter to Emily. She went about her business with a kind of quiet resolve. I knew she couldn't live the rest of her life like this. I started seeing visions of Emily in her late 30s, early 40s, walking around talking to herself, having lost her mind. I could hear her talking to Pup as if he were here. I now realized I was creating this sad life for Emily to suit my purposes. She was only 20. Even without Pup, she had plenty of years to find someone else. She was, as I said before, an attractive girl, and I was a drunk who heard a lot of things that were probably never said. Dinner time came. I didn't have any dinner, or what dinner I did have was found in a couple of cigars and a half a bottle of whiskey. I went over to the office, took my position on the front steps. I sat there with the bottle. I didn't smoke, though. The cigar smoke bothered Emily, so I refrained when I expected her to be around. After Youngman had gone to bed, Emily came out and sat down. Tell me why you offered to come back to my room with me a while back, I said. From what you said, you don't have a woman. I thought that maybe you wanted one for at least a little while. It wouldn't have been any hardship on me, was the answer I got. It wouldn't have been any hardship on her. That made me smile. I reached out, placed my hand on her shoulder. She moved closer to me. I rubbed her neck, just like my mama used to rub my neck when I was upset about something. She seemed to like it. She looked at me and smiled. Actually, I did have a woman. She's left me behind, though. Maybe I already told you that. I'm not sure what I've said to you. I'm not really sure of what you said to me. I placed a hand on her chin and turned her face towards me. I kissed her. She let me, but she didn't kiss me back. I felt I owed an apology and made one. I rose and began my walk to the room I was staying in. I entered the room and then turned to the door to find her standing there. I motioned with my hand for her to enter the room. She stepped in from the doorway, and I closed the door behind her. I felt a small bit of perspiration on my forehead. I wiped it away with a smile. What was I doing with this girl? I went over to the bed and sat down. She walked up to me. She was standing maybe a foot away from me. I couldn't look up at her. This is what you really want? I asked. I answered my own question with a shake of my head. No, this isn't what you really want. I reached out my hand to grab one of hers. I couldn't touch her though. You know this would be a mistake, don't you? I'm not Buck. Is that what you were thinking? Maybe you'll get back at him somehow? You said it wouldn't be any hardship on you, but I could easily make it a hardship for you. Pup seems to have gotten on with his life. So should you. That means leaving Pup behind, leaving me behind. You can stay here for as long as you want. You do a good job here. Stay here for as long as you want. I shook my head again, rose without looking at her or saying another word to her. I left. I knew for her sake and for mine, I had to stay away. That's a lot longer than I thought.